Hello, and thank you for your interest in Nest Insight's work. My name is Jo Phillips, and I'm Director of Research and Innovation for Nest Insight. And with me here is Greg Bowe, who is one of the researchers who worked on these trials. Since early 2019, Nest Insight has been working with the Department for Work and Pensions, or DWP, in the UK, on a research programme to explore and test different approaches, all aimed at encouraging and enabling increased long-term saving among self-employed people. We know that self-employment is becoming more common in the UK, and self-employed people are less likely to save into a pension than employed people. Whilst employed people are now likely to be auto-enrolled by their employer, who will have set up a pension scheme they can save into and make contributions on their behalf, self-employed people obviously don't have this support in place. The first stage of our research programme, published late last year, helped us to better understand self-employed people's savings attitudes and behaviours and the products, services and information sources they turn to manage their work and money. Some of our learnings are shared on this slide, and if you're interested to read more, you can also find the report on our website. We found that while self-employed people are mostly open to saving and would welcome help and guidance to do so, variability and uncertainty of their income, as well as affordability, create barriers to actually saving. So 61% of the self-employed people we surveyed who didn't have a pension said that they're put off pensions because they feel they are inflexible, while 65% said they could not afford to save for retirement. We're committed to trialling practical solutions that could make it easier for self-employed people to save. For example, by allowing people to automatically save money in a way that flexes to the ups and downs of income. We're excited now to share the findings from the second stage of this research, 2 email messaging field trials conducted in the UK in 2019, which tested self-employed people's engagement with different retirement saving messages. The email trials had 2 main purposes. Firstly, we wanted to understand the effect of messaging on self-employed people's engagement with pension saving and the behaviours that different messages might prompt. However, we also recognise the potential limits of messaging alone in inspiring a change in saving behaviour among self-employed people, particularly given some of the barriers to saving we've just highlighted. So a second aim was to use findings from these messaging trials to inform the design of online savings tools, which we plan to test in the next stage of our research programme. So what did we do? Firstly, using the learnings of our earlier research, we developed 4 messages. The first message frame was palatable contributions, drawing on the research evidence that describing contributions as a daily rather than a monthly amount can make saving feel more manageable and within reach. The second message frame was flexible contributions. We know that people assume pensions may be rigid and rule-bound. Emphasising that you can pay what you can, when you can, could be reassuring for people who don't receive necessarily a regular wage. The third message frame was tax relief. We found that tax relief was highly motivating for the self-employed people we spoke to in our earlier qualitative research. Although self-employed people don't get an employer contribution towards their pension, the free money message was still powerful when tax relief was highlighted. And the fourth was a loss frame. People had a strong emotional reaction in our earlier research when the act of not saving into a pension was framed as an opportunity cost. Although this wasn't a popular or an easy message, it did show some potential to cut through and connect with people. Based on this, we developed 4 subject lines and supporting email texts with links to take action to test in our messaging trials. The subject lines were, firstly, could you save £2.50 a day for the palatable contributions frame? Flexible pension options for the self-employed for flexible contributions, a tax-free way to save for your retirement for the tax relief frame, and don't miss out on pension returns for the loss frame. All the emails included brief text related to the relevant message before turning to identical content, encouraging the recipient to click a link to the sender organisation's website to find out more about pension saving. So who were the senders of the emails? Nest Insight and DWP chose to partner with the Association of Independent Professionals and the Self-Employed, IPSI, and Nest Corporation to conduct the trials. We're really grateful to both of them for their collaboration in this research. Both organisations have large self-employed memberships who could be contacted via email. The two populations also have some notable differences in characteristics, particularly gender composition and reported annual income, which we hypothesised would allow us to see how different types of self-employed people might respond to the different messages. So the emails were sent to these two different groups of self-employed people. In total, over 10,000 members of IPSI who are eligible for a group personal pension through their membership but had not yet signed up for it, and over 9,000 NEST self-employed members, people who have voluntarily set up as self-employed members of the NEST pension scheme. Each of those individuals was randomly assigned one of the four messages. The first emails were sent in June 2019 to IPSI members and in September 2019 to NEST members, with a reminder follow-up email sent a month later in both cases. We assessed engagement with the trial emails in the following ways. Firstly, how many people opened an email after receiving it, the open rate. Secondly, how many people clicked on the link in an email after opening it, the click-through rate. And thirdly, how many people engaged in related activities such as exploring the NEST or IPSI website in the 3 months after receiving the email. For a subset of NEST members who were contributing to their pension regularly, we also looked at a fourth outcome measure, any changes to their contribution levels in the 3 months after the email relative to a comparison group who didn't receive any email. We also looked at whether response rates and behaviour varied for different types of self-employed people, for example, by age or by gender. Just before we get into sharing our findings, it's important to note that these trials were conducted before the coronavirus pandemic. The UK economic context has since changed significantly as a result of the pandemic and the lockdown measures. We recognise that many self-employed people's personal finances have been affected and that saving for retirement may now seem more difficult for many people. This month, we've started conducting further research to better understand the impacts of the COVID-19 crisis on self-employed people, looking particularly at the challenges they face in saving for retirement. As part of that work, we'll explore the post-COVID relevance of the messages we tested in this trial, as well as some new ones designed to be particularly relevant to this context. So now Greg's going to share some of the headline learnings, and more detail can be found in the research report, which is now on our website.
So with the results, firstly, we found that people were more likely than usual to open the emails. Across the combined IPSI and NEST trial sample populations, we observed high open rates for all four messaging frames, between 46% for the palatable contributions email and 51% for the flexible contributions email. These open rates are between 5 to 10% higher than benchmarks set by IPSI and NEST for similar email campaigns that they send to their members. This suggests that the subject lines of the emails we tested were salient for self-employed people and have the potential to start engaging them in retirement saving. Overall, the open rates were similar for all of the emails. Only the lower open rate for the palatable contributions email was statistically significant. We observed click-through rates of 5 to 7% across the combined sample, with no differences between the email groups. It is not possible to provide an exact benchmark for click-through rates across two separate organisations. However, as a standalone result, click-through rates for the NEST trials fell within the expected benchmarks of campaigns that we sent to the wider NEST membership. We should consider the high open rates but more average click-through rates within the context of the barriers to saving that Joe highlighted up front. The disparity in these outcome measures suggests that messages appealing to self-employed people's specific needs have an important role to play in attracting attention to any solution or intervention, but, as expected, are not enough on their own to support these workers to save more consistently and in greater numbers. Next, we looked at member demographics. There was no significant differences in open or click-through rates by gender. There were, however, notable differences by age. Older age groups were more likely to open the tax relief email, with a 56% open rate amongst those aged 50 and older, compared to 45% for those aged 30 to 39. In the IPSI trial, the tax relief email had the highest open rate of all four messages, and the open rate was higher than for the palatable contributions email at a statistically significant level. In the NEST trial, there was no significant differences in the open rates for the messages. It may be that the IPSI membership, which comprises of higher income earners on average than the NEST membership, found this message to be more salient, perhaps because they stand to gain more from higher tax relief or because they're more aware of the benefit as higher tax rate payers. Higher open rates for the flexible contributions email amongst those aged 30 to 39 suggest that an email describing how you can save, what you can, when you can, may speak more to barriers related to the available income that this group faces when it comes to pension saving. And in the NEST population, we were able to do a little more analysis where we saw differences in responses by pot value and contribution patterns. In the NEST trial, pension pot value, over and above all other factors, was the strongest determinant of whether a self-employed person was likely to open the emails. Only the open rate for the palatable contributions email did not have a statistically significant relationship with pot size. Within the NEST population, we observed three broad groups. Regular contributors who were making contributions to their NEST pension somewhat frequently. They have made more than 7 or more contributions in the last 2 years, often, but not always, once per month. The second group was irregular contributors who were likely to make large ad hoc contributions at less regular intervals, particularly at the end of the tax year. The third group was lapsed members who had not contributed to their NEST pension in the last 2 years. We found that those who contribute regularly to a NEST pension had higher open rates across all 4 emails compared to those who have been contributing irregularly or had not contributed at all in the past 2 years. We also found that the flexible and loss-free messages appear to resonate more with those who have stopped making contributions for at least 2 years. These emails had higher click-through rates compared to those who contributed more regularly. People who got the palatable contributions emails and then clicked a link to the scheme website spent more time on average on the website than those who opened and clicked through from other emails. A higher proportion of those who clicked through went on to log into their NEST account. This suggests that different messages may prompt differing levels of engagement, with the palatable contributions messaging potentially encouraging deeper engagement among those who open an email and click a link to go to the website. And finally, and while this was not one of the primary aims of the research, we did test to see whether there were differences between the groups that received the email or not. We found that NEST members who were making regular pension contributions and received any of the 4 messaging emails were more likely to increase their contributions in the 3 months after receiving the email compared to our comparison group of self-employed members who did not receive trial emails.
Thank you, Greg. So to sum up, overall, the trial findings suggest that messages that are developed specifically around the characteristics, needs and context of self-employed people do have the potential to engage them in pension saving. We've seen that relevant messages can appeal to self-employed people and have some impact on their savings behaviours. We also saw that different messages are likely to resonate to differing extents with particular subgroups within the very diverse population of self-employed people we have in the UK. Our trial suggests that it's important to target messages as closely as possible to specific subgroups of self-employed people in order to better engage them in pension saving. For example, we saw that higher earners and older people engage more with the tax relief message, that irregular contributors with lower value pots responded to the palatable contributions messaging, and that the flexible contributions and loss framing messages worked better with people who have stopped saving. Ideally, messages would be individually personalised, of course, but if that's not feasible, it's still possible to be relevant to particular groups under the broad self-employed umbrella. We also know that on their own, messages are not likely to be enough to support self-employed people to save in greater numbers, although we did see some behavioural change in contribution amounts. Further support in the form of products and savings mechanisms which better address the income volatility and affordability barriers facing many self-employed people are needed to help this large and varied population meet the challenge of saving enough to help improve their financial security in later life. So the messaging developed through these trials will be taken through to the next stage of this research programme, where we'll be conducting technology-based trials of solutions that will be designed to make it easier for self-employed people to save via platforms and services they already use to manage their money. The development of these trials is currently on hold while we conduct the additional research to better understand the impacts of the coronavirus pandemic on self-employed people's finances and their needs around longer-term saving. This research will help us to assess, for example, whether the technology-based trials should focus solely on retirement savings or whether they should potentially also include shorter-term or emergency savings mechanisms if there is evidence that self-employed people feel perhaps that they need to build up more liquid savings before even considering saving for retirement. We're really looking forward to being able to share future learnings with you from both the COVID-19 research and from the technology-based trials. And if you'd like to be involved with our work, please do get in touch. Thank you.